I'd like to thank the organizer first of this weekly seminar series, Dr. Norman Rayat, who is a lecturer in law at the Leicester Law School and the founder and convener of the Global South Network. My name is Sabine Franklin. I'm the Mellon Postdoctoral Fellow in Africana Studies at Wellesley College in Wellesley, Massachusetts in the United States. I will be chairing the session today. Then we have Professor Onuora-Oguno Azubike. This is the discussant for today's session. He is the head of the Department of Jurisprudence and International Law at the Faculty of Law at the University of Ilorin and a visiting professor at the University of Torino in Italy. He is the author of the book entitled Development and the Right to Education in Africa, and also an editor of the book series titled Education Law, Strategic Policy, and Sustainable Development in Africa, Agenda 2063, with Palgrave Publisher. Yelyzaveta Monastyrova is the peer commentator for our session today. Yelyzaveta is a PhD candidate at the Law School of the Open University. Her dissertation focuses on the inclusion of exploitation of citizens into the anti-trafficking regime in Ukraine, Spain, and the United Kingdom, and the relationship between victimhood and citizenship. Yelyzaveta holds an Erasmus Joint Master's degree in South European Studies from the University of Glasgow, Autonomous University of Madrid, and the LUISS Guido Carli, and a BA in International Relations from the Oles Onchard Dnipro National University. And last but not least, our guest speaker for today is Mingyi Huang, who is a PhD candidate at the law school at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. He focuses on assessing the impact of listing rules, changes on the stock market, and examining the institutional design of the regulatory approach in the context of securities regulation. He holds an LLM in International Commercial Law from the University of Strathclyde and another master's degree in Civil Law and Commercial Law from Shanghai Institute of Social Sciences in China. During his postgraduate studies, he developed knowledge in both UK and China security laws, acquired statistical skills that enabled him to conduct empirical legal studies. And aside from his academic pursuits, he participated in the finance stimulation exercise organized by Morgan Stanley and Amplify Me, through which he gained hands-on experience in investment banking, trading, and asset management. Additionally, he completed an internship at the Shanghai Stock Exchange, contributing to the team's research work on encouraging long-term investment behavior in the securities market. So Mingyi, you have 30 to 35 minutes for the presentation, which will be followed by 5 minutes for comments, questions of the discussant and the peer commentator, and 15 minutes of questions and answers by the attendees. So the floor is now yours. You are on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Rayat for offering this precious opportunity for me to present my work today. And thank you for Dr. Franklin for chairing this session. And I also extend my gratitude to Professor Azubike for dedicating your time to join us as the discussant, and to Ms. Monastyrova Monastyrova for your participation as the peer commentator. I also want to thank all the attendees for being here today and look forward to your constructive comments. So I'm going to share my slides. Can anyone look at see the slides? Okay. Today's topic is about the evolution of listing rules governing equity IPOs in self-regulation era, using the evidence of UK from the 1871 to 1985. And the reason I'm choosing to start from 1871, it is because of historical importance, because since that time, the stock market in the UK started to play a central role in allocating the financial resources. The topic breaks down into 5 sections. The first is it starts with an introduction about the research question, the literature gap, and the methodology, and then it goes into 3 major periods to examine the rules, development, and the rationale behind those changes. Finally, it concludes with the findings and significance. Okay, let's move on to the introduction. The research questions is about what's the evolving magnitude of titles in listing rules that regulate share IPOs during the self-regulation period in the UK. And the next one is the rationale behind the major changes. And I have found a lot of existing literature about the history of the stock market. My research was built on those literatures on the histories of the corporate ownership and control in the UK, as well as the research on stock exchange stories covering the institutional design, membership, and market development, as well as the studying of the insider trading and the market abuses history. Those researches provided me a very good wide picture to understand the law in the wider social context. And the methods I applied in this research includes the legal historical archival study to look at the listing rules in different years, and then consider the rules in the social context by applying the social legal approach. And regarding to analyze the rationale behind major changes, I applied the philosophical analysis of Hegel's short logic, in particular, the concepts of the level of being, essence, phenomenon, and actuality. Later, I will go into more detail. Now, let's turn to the first stage. First period is starting from 1871 to 1914. Is the pre-World War I period. We first look at the evolvement of the listing rules regarding the governance of the share IPOs. Usually, during this period, there are 2 options companies can choose to go for IPO. The first one is called special settlement. The another one is official quotation, much likely today's quotation process. But the special settlement is much easier and largely unregulated, so it's very popular in that time. There has research shows more than 2/3 of the total IPOs were conducted through the special settlement. And when we look at in detail about the rules for special settlement in this period, it became even less restrictive during the time. For example, in 1871, in 1879, it no longer required the minimum issue of not less than 1/2 of the nominal capital, and for the payment of 10% upon the amount subscribed. Instead, it only demanded sufficient certificate or script are ready for delivery. But there is only a small exception to this less restrictive period trend. Because, for example, since 1905, the stock exchange would not grant special settlement for shares issued to vendors credited as fully or partially paid until 6 months have elapsed from the designated date for the special settlement of the shares or securities of the same type that were offered to the public. The rationale behind this is to avoid market manipulation caused by those shares issued to vendors. And when we look at the official quotation listing rules, the trend is opposite to the special settlement. It became stricter and much more prescriptive over time. But despite those detailed changes in each rules, the stock exchange was not concerned with the quantity of the securities the market handled, because members are very free to deal in whatever financial instruments they choose. So what happens? What happens if because they don't care about the quantity or the real authenticity of the documents? So if there is some if there is not real, if there are some fraud in this process to apply for a IPO, then it's all left to the case law, the ordinary legal system, to deal with it. For example, if there was fraud in the documents submitted to the stock exchange, it would constitute fraud and face the criminal liability. Additionally, it also faces civil liability for people subscribed the shares issued by the company. So this is the overall trend of the listing rules change in this period. Now let's go into more in detail about the rationale behind the trend, behind this trend. Okay. First of all, we'll look at the level of being. I will start with a little introduction of the background of the analysis method. The level of being refers to the most immediate aspect of things, basically things just as they are, and includes the determinations like quantity, and measure. The quantity relates to about defining the characteristics of a thing, which makes it what it is and different with others. But for quantity relates to the amount or extension of a thing devoid of its quantities, and the measure unifies the quantity and quantity and shows how they interrelate. The measure is the turning point from the accumulation of change in quantity to quantity change. So in the case of the listing rules, in this context, the quantity change, it's the part for the quantity change part, there has saw expansion of the stock market in this period, marked by an influx of foreign and domestic large enterprises seeking financing on the stock exchange. Meanwhile, more and more securities were less actively traded due to the limited capital pool in the market. So that causes problems for the stock exchange, because this increased the cost of matching orders by the stock exchange members. So as a result, the stock exchange had an incentive to not welcome more IPO applications that may not generate substantial profits for them. For example, if in case the companies may not be very interested by the investors, for example. And the turning point is once such costs outweigh the benefits brought by the increasing number of listing shares, the stock exchange started to restrict the listing and raise the threshold gradually. And this was evidenced by the Economist report in that period. And then we'll look at the essence level. At this level, things are no longer considered in their immediacy, but rather in their reflection and mediation. This stage is characterized by concepts such as identity, difference, and ground. The identity relates to the sameness and the continuity of a thing within itself. The difference pertains to the negation within the thing, leading to the development of it. And the ground is the underlying basis or reason for a thing. So basically, the identity is the thing inside the stock market, which they share the same goal and maintains the characteristics, maintains the quality of the thing. But the difference is the tension between inside it, and together it drives the change. In the case of the stock exchange market, stock market, there are four major participants. The first one, of course, is the stock exchange. It provided the market. And next, it's the companies issuing shares. And the other side is the investors buying shares. And besides of the three parties, the government also played a very important role, because government also has financing needs through the market. And also it receives the tax revenue from the trading. So even though the four different parties have different objectives, but an orderly and effective stock market would align those parties' interests together and forms the identity part. And in this period, however, there's a tension emerge between the companies and the stock exchange. As previously discussed, the increasing IPO needs increase the cost of the stock exchange to match the orders, and this affected their self-interest to maximize its profits. So this tension would drive the changes in this period. And next we'll go to what appeared to us because of the essence. For the level of phenomenon, it is an illustration to this respect that was not action had been taken to respond to the market practice. I'm sorry. First, we'll start with the form, because since 1879, the stock exchange's listing requirements stipulated that corporations needed to be of significant magnitude and importance, and subsequently, more requirements was added gradually. And this is what appeared to us. And underlying this trend was the rationale to maximize the benefits for exchange members by filtering enterprises big in size and with the potential of active trading by investors. And the resultant improved investor protection in this process was actually a byproduct rather than the goal itself. Because this can be evidenced by a crisis happened in 1901. Because at that time, many investors participated in the trading of new issues before the special settlement day was fixed. So many people no matter regardless of whether they have the capital at their bank to process the trading, they speculated to engage in that trading, because before the special settlement day, they don't need to handle any physical money or deliver any physical securities before that period. In that period, so this caused a lot of speculation in the market, and finally a crisis happened. But in responding to it, there's little. The stock exchange did nothing to respond to this cause of the crisis. And regarding the relations, there are two factors are of relevance which can influence the rules development in this period. The first one is the government. However, the government in this period showed no impetus to intervene because there was no major public outcry, and also it was satisfied with the financing through the stock market. So it doesn't impact the stock exchange's decisions on rule changes. But however, the competition landscape with the domestic provincial stock exchanges as well as the international stock exchanges affects the London Stock Exchange's decision making, because at that time there are over 10 provincial stock exchanges in the UK. They are because many companies, especially companies, usually have a better known to local communities. So the provincial stock exchanges usually were the perfect places for many companies go for listing, because recognized with better recognition by local investors, it would have received a more higher valuation. But the only thing is when the company needs a more capital exceeded the capital supply by the provincial stock exchanges, it usually would turn to the London Stock Exchanges as the national biggest one. So the competition with the provincial stock exchanges is a valid one, and for the international stock exchanges, at the early time of this period, the London Stock Exchanges is the most open stock exchanges in the world. It welcomes foreign corporations issues and also the foreign government issues, compared with the stock exchanges in Paris, Amsterdam, and in New York. So at that period, the London Stock Exchange is a global leading role and dominant role in the international markets. But things changed at a later time of this period, when those international stock exchanges started to be more open to foreign issues. So at this time, the London Stock Exchange's international business faced strong competition with those international competitors. And now we turn to the last level of which is the actuality. Its actuality represents the unity of essence and existence. It's the stage where things are not only as they appear, but are also realized and manifested fully. The concepts of possibility, actuality, and necessity are considered here. The possibility is the potential stages or conditions that a thing can have, while the actuality is where this potential became real, and the necessity refers to the inevitable development that arises from the nature of things. So come back to this topic. The possibility is if there was sufficient capital invested in all listed shares, there would be unnecessary for the stock exchange to raise the market entry threshold, because this would only bring more business for them. But the actuality is the base of rising number of IPOs outweigh the increase in investor participation in the market and the competition. And the next condition is the competition landscape constraint, how much the London Stock Exchange could tighten its listing rules, listing criteria. And as a result, the stock exchange opted for raising the listing standards, but did not went far enough, as evidenced by it only increased the requirements for seeking official quotation, left the IPO by special settlement largely unregulated, and it only concerned the formality compliance of the requirements rather than reviewing the genuineness or soundness of business. As a result, the listing regulation during this period left the reviewers a laissez-faire impression. And looking at the necessity, what we can infer from this, the essence is the investor protection was unlikely to be prioritized by the stock exchange unless the stock exchange's self-interest was substantially undermined if they are not protecting the investors duly. So this is the analysis for the pre-war period. Now we'll move on to the wartime and the interwar period time from 1914 to 1945. As what we did just now, we first look at the development of listing rules in this period. Different with the first pre-war period, the special settlement was changed to permission to deal, much stricter than the special settlement. But also, the trend maintains the same. In this period, it became the rules for permission to deal became more and more tighter, and there was a turning point at the 1929, the market crisis. The same goes for official quotation. The turning point at 1929 is very obvious, and it was observed by researchers that aside from greater documentation requirements in this period, the stock exchange was expected to review the quality of each application to see whether the value placed upon it by the vendors or issuers reflect the true worth. So the 1929 was the turning point with a more emphasis on investor protection. And now, when we look at the rationale behind this change, we will still applying the same methodology. First, look at the level of beam. The quantity part with the continuing expansion of the stock market. It has become increasingly important in the capital market, in which the government, the corporations, investors, and members of the stock exchange more and more relied on proper functioning of the stock market to achieve their respective aims. But the turning point is the market crisis, and another one is the World War. The two world wars did affect the changes in the rules, in the tightness of the rules. And on the quantity part is the stock exchange further restrict listing to support. For one way, it supports government funding for the war and the after-war reconstruction period. And also, it restricts listing to maintain investor confidence after the market crisis. Then, when we look at the essence level, the identity part maintains the same, but the difference part, there are two major intentions emerge in this period. The first one is the government increasing capital needs the government has more capital needs to sustain the wars and afterward rebuilding. And this caused the tension with the funding needs of the domestic enterprises as well as the international borrowers. This is one new tension. Another tension is the investor protection and exchange's interest to maximize its profits. So this identity and difference drove the changes in this period. When we look at what appears to us because of the essence first we look at the form. What appeared is the stock exchanges started to restrict new issues by both domestic companies and foreign entities during the two wars, and also maintained its restrictions on foreign entities in interwar peacetime. And after the 1929 crisis, the stock exchange has since tried to assess if the value of each issue reflects the true worth. So this is the form, and underlying this form is the rationale to favor fundraising by the British government in the name of national interest. Specifically, is to win the wars and to rebuild the economy, rebuild the society. And the other rationale is to secure the quantity of the securities listed on the stock exchange by more cautious scanning, through which contributing to reboost the investor confidence again. And in this period, when we look at the relations, domestic provincial stock exchange is still a valid one, because there was, according to stock exchange yearbook, the London Stock Exchange at that time only captured half of the total UK stock market. So even though the stock exchange is always the dominant one in the market, but compared with the provincial stock exchanges together, it is a half-half divide. So the competition from the stock exchange is still a very strong one. And however, the competition with the international stock exchanges at this time was changed, because the loss of international business during this period was actually a desired outcome for the government to avoid the loss of scarce capital flowing abroad. So the international competition landscape would not affect the raw changes in this period. Then, when we look at the final level of the actuality, first we look at the prosperity. When we look at the tension between the government and the funding needs of other parties, as presumably, if there was sufficient capital in the market, it would be unnecessary to prioritize the British government's capital needs. And also, if the stock exchange as a market provider and rulemaker had placed itself in a more neutral position by delicately balancing all relevant party stakes in the market, its tension with investors could have been alleviated. But the actuality is that the capital is not unlimited. It was scarce. And as a result, the government applied its ultimate power to aggressively intervene in the market to reduce its competition with other parties' funding needs. And also, the nature of the self-regulatory body in power had an inherent incentive to maximize its own gains. As a result, the tension became stronger and stronger. The tension with investors became stronger until it burst 1929, led to a shift to more responsible regulation for investors in its new rules afterwards. So the aim was to rebuild public confidence. But what we can infer from this analysis is, first, because the capital was scarcity in most of the times, especially in the economic downturn, the government would likely to intervene the market for a longer time And the past successful experience of intervention, coupled with the support of the Keynesianism in theory, which advocates government intervention in the economic activity, would likely to create a past dependence for the government to control the securities market for a longer time to achieve its wider policy objectives. And also for...
Hi, Mingyi, just reminding you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. And the investors were also to be protected at most the suboptimal level under the sole governance of the security, under the sole governance of the self-regulatory body. Now, the last period is the 1945 and 1985. It became the characteristics of the rule changes was it became increasingly stringent, evidenced by the loss of the permission to deal option since the 1946, and also the evidence from the official quotation rules became stricter and more prescriptive over time. Applying the same method is the stock. The quantity part is since the World War I, the stock exchange had been recognized as an important element in the capital market, and the stock exchange's long-standing close cooperation with the government since the World War I led to investing public increasingly regarded it as the regulatory authority to which its complaints could be made regarding any misdeed by a company. And quickly look at the difference in this part. A major new difference in this part is increasing IPO needs with the exchange's self-interest. In particular, is fear of public outcry that would risk loss of self-regulation. And because of this new tension, the previous two intentions regarding the IPO needs and the investor protection with the stock exchange's self-interest was minimized. And we'll go through to the actuality level. The stock exchange became bolder and launched the unlisted securities market in 1981 to accommodate smaller and riskier companies. And it was recognized as the competent regulatory body responsible for promulgating and enforcing listing requirements. And what we can infer from this trend is the status of independent statutory regulator to deliver in the public interest would minimize the tension between its own interest with that of other market stakeholders. Only left the tensions between them, especially between the company's desire for easier access for capital and investor protection. And the stock exchange would also unlikely to fully immune from government interference in the case of another national emergencies, for example. The findings is the rules regulating share floating during this period became increasingly stringent. And under this phenomenon, it was primarily the stock exchange's self-interest that drove the movement. Its tensions with either the companies seeking for IPO or investors finally led to an end of this self-regulation status. The findings of this part would contribute to my whole thesis on empirical studies to study how the changes in listing rules affect the market performance, affect the company's IPO decisions. And together, the studies expect to inform future listing rule reforms. And the last part is the bibliography. And thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mingyi, for that very interesting presentation. So now we'll open up the floor to the discussant, Professor Onuora-Oguno Azubike. So now the floor is yours and you have 5 minutes to give your comments.
Are you waiting for me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was wondering. Thank you, Mingyi. That was quite an interesting presentation. And of course, my comments would just be general. And I hope it makes some sense, but I enjoyed listening to it. So the first reaction I have is, why did we stop 39 years ago? Is there a reason why we are looking at 1871 to 1985? And yet I agree absolutely that this is possible, but perhaps I want to ask if there is somewhere in the thesis that you are now projecting also covering this new era, what your findings could mean for this new era, if you understand what I mean. So why do we look at that? And what lessons are you suggesting that we should go back to that era, or we should avoid the pitfalls in that era? That way it's going to be better coherent, for us to understand why we are stopping this research to what happened 39 years ago. Recently, is it better? Is it worse off? Should we go back to the old school era, if I may use that terminology? And then the conceptual framings that you use, for example, tightness, self-regulation. So perhaps one needs to understand whether you advocate for a self-regulatory framework, or you advocate for a government, if that is what you advance by tightness, by a government controlled frame. And for example, in the stock that you analyze, considering recent developments, and that is why I raised that first question, considering recent developments when we have the blockchain technology, we have the crypto technology, what is happening with stocks? And we know that one of the very strong criticisms against the blockchain technology is the inability of governments to control it. So, and this is also one of the reasons that has been given by the developers of these networks, of these currencies, which are also now finding their way into the various stock exchange platforms, because they want to avoid tightness, they want to avoid that control. So what is it how do you suggest that this is dealt with? So I think these are just 2 or 3 things I think I want to chip in, and I hope when you reflect on them, it will make your thesis, which I think is quite important, better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Azubike. Regarding your first question, why I look such a long period and how does it connect with today's approach? The reason I'm looking such a long period of time, because usually the trend is better to be analyzed with more data. So and because I have access to those archives, and this provided me the feasibility, and also for the next empirical legal studies the rich data, the more details of the tightness of the listing rule changes, and compared with the stock market the actual performance, it would provide more robust findings, at a later stage. That's the why such a long period. And I would, regarding the approach, whether we should learn from this approach, absolutely. The self-regulation part in the past demonstrated its expertise in serving different parties' interests, but its limitations is also demonstrated very well in that period. because it cannot balance the interest with the investors or balance with the interest of with the companies. So because of that, we would not return to that period taking the similar approach, but we have to learn from this lesson to refine it. For example, we can use the stock exchange's expertise in the field because it was comprised with the industry members. So we can make a full use of its strengths, but also we add mechanism to limit its limitations. For example, as what the current approach adopts, the FCA is an independent regulatory body, even it's independent from the government to some extent. And this kind of a third-party independent rule is in my view, it learned the lesson from the past the failure of the self-regulation period and evolved to this current status. And regarding the second question about the government, whether government should intervene the market, in my view, and when it relates to the blockchain, the new things, whether government should intervene, my view tend to be at the beginning, at the emerging of innovation, government should give more flexibility to let it develop to let it develop further. And once that new innovation could exercise greater impact on the society, for example, the blockchain, currently in the UK, it has become more and more people would like to participate in the trading of the Bitcoins, for example. And this part, because of its great risk in this trading, in this type of trading. And the government, at this stage, I think it's necessary to step in to protect the wider investing public. As what the UK adopts at present, it's still not allow retail investors directly engage in the investments in the blockchain, in the Bitcoins. I would agree with this approach to protect the customers, even though the US and Canada and Hong Kong and the EU also has relaxed their restrictions on the Bitcoin trading.
Sorry, we're a little over time for the discussant part. So if you could wrap up, Mingyi, just the rest of your response, and then maybe after the session is over, if you have any more comments to make, you could send it via email.
Thank you.
Azubike, Professor Azubike, is that okay? If you have any more comments?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, he's the expert. So I just thought of those slight areas areas I think he needed also to look at.
Okay, no worries. And so I do want to, give the floor to Yelyzaveta, who is the peer commentator. I hope I said your name correctly. Sorry if I butchered it.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for the presentation. It couldn't be further away from what I'm studying, so for me it was very instructive. So thank you for presenting it so clearly and in a way that could be followed. So it was really impressive. And by the end I understood, I was struggling a lot, but by now I understood it. So, well done on presenting it for people who are not aware of anything about, stock exchange and all of that. So I guess I will be quite brief in my comment because I tried to focus on your methods and I was very intrigued by what you're doing. So maybe you would provide some explanations for why you chose to approach it from Hegel's philosophical standpoint. Why this way? So did you consider alternative frameworks, or why did you choose this one for analyzing this very, very empirical phenomenon? So yeah, why Hegel, and then have you probably thought of critical realism as also a framework for doing your social legal analysis, because it is quite close. It draws on Marxism, but then goes in different directions as well. And yeah, also I was wondering as how you look at different actors, because you have a plurality of them. You have the government, the investors, then you compare the international situation, and how do you manage this multitude of different actors or stakeholders? So do you have a framework for looking at their interactions and organizing it all? Yeah, hope that makes sense. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Regarding your first question about why choosing this methodology, for the reason I'm using the Hegel's short logic, because this relates to the legal philosophy the area, and I find it useful because it can solve my problem. I understand there are many alternatives methods and many existing studies using the traditional historical studies, looking at the archives and try to understand the reason behind changes for a single event, for example, the crisis or any other big events. But I find by using the philosophy method, it helps me to understand the picture, understand the topic deeper. So I find it useful to solve the practical problems. And sorry, what's your second question?
Thank you for an explanation. So I just was wondering how you organize all the actors that you look at, in your archival research and then in your philosophy. So how you compare the influence of the government to the companies, to probably other stock markets, and then the political situation as well, because you mentioned that it's social legal. Obviously, you look at the impact of the First World War, Second World War, and so on. So how do you balance economy with law and with politics?
So it's about how to organize the data of different sources.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For data, the primary sources is the stock exchanges rules and regulations in that period, as well as the stock exchanges the inside meeting minutes, which provides very helpful the first-hand materials. And also there are many secondary materials regarding the market, regarding the economy, regarding the social status at the period. So combine together, when looking together and applying the philosophy method to connect, it generates the current ideas of my findings. Thank you. Hope this answers your question.
Very much. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again, Professor Azubike and Ms. Monastyrova, for giving your comments on Mingyi's paper. So now I'd like to take the last few minutes and open it up to the floor, to our members in the audience who would want to pose any questions or comments. And so I'll just go into the chat, see if there are any questions, or if anyone wants to raise their hand in the using the icon. Okay.
Hello. Oh, sorry, quick one. I think
okay.
your presentation was well cut out. I mean, I don't know much about your topic, but then the structure and the way you were able to present it makes sense to me. So I think if we're able to incorporate the comments that you have given, especially how you are handling the stakeholder, the data involving different stakeholders, and then Prof's contribution, I think you will have a very good thesis to present. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm seeing a comment here towards you, Mingyi, and from Arini, who's saying it's great presentation and very interesting work as well. So wish you best of luck with the rest of your research. If there's any other questions or comments, I'll just give it a few more seconds.
Okay, you go. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Professor Azubike, you turned on your mic. Did you want to comment more?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I think I like the work. I like the work. It's an interesting one, definitely, and I want to encourage our presenter today to push on, you know, just bring in those contemporary issues to complement what you've done historically. But I think it's a good one. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay, thank you. And Mingyi, you do have a question here in the chat section from Sonia Tamaklo, who says it's a very insightful research, and she's asking if you can please clarify the research methodology used for the data collection.
Okay. The most challenging part in this research is to consult the key archives. And at the beginning, I contacted the London Stock Exchange, but their archives are not very rich. So I tried many sources. First, the librarians in my universities, and also attended the British Library Open Day in London. And through the librarians there, they directed me to the Guildhall Library, where I found most of the resources. So the lessons is just keep trying, keep asking for advices from those professionals, librarians. Usually they know more about the archives and you would direct you to the right places very quickly. So just keep asking, keep trying. Thank you. How do you ensure the reliability of data? Okay, the reliability, because the first-hand data comes from the official sources. So I would assume the official records are accurate. That's my assumption. And also I rely some archives of the Financial Times, The Economist, because those newspaper reporting are also kind of influential in the past and in nowadays. So those kind of publications I also relied on for my research. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. So thank you, Mingyi, and thank you, Sonia, for your question. And so we're down to literally the last 2 minutes. So we do have one more time for a question or a comment. If anybody wanted to write something in the chat or raise their hand and jump in.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And well, thank you all for attending today's session. And thank you, Mingyi, for presenting on your research. So please tune in next week at the same time, 2 p.m. For our GSN presentation on March 20th. I actually don't have the topic for next week, but I'm sure Norman will email us all and let us know who is presenting, who is discussing, and who is our peer commentator. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.